Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. My name is Russell Ganem, and I am the Associate Provost and Dean of International Programs at the University of Iowa. It is my great pleasure to welcome you today to our webinar entitled Bridging Voices, Exploring Language, Justice, and Identity. This discussion is part of International Programs' effort to extend and deepen its research collaborations in sub-Saharan Africa. The University of Iowa has many partnerships in East Africa, but among the most important is that with the University of Dar es Salaam. Just last November, I gave a paper in Lagos at the biannual conference of the African Research Universities Alliance, otherwise known as ARUA, where the University of Dar es Salaam is a major player. I was able to interact with colleagues from the University of Dar es Salaam while in Lagos, and I look forward to building these relationships in the future. The Office of the Vice Chancellor at the University of Dar es Salaam is a co-sponsor of today's event, as is the Directorate of Internationalization, Convocation, and Advancement at the University of Dar es Salaam. And here at the University of Iowa, co-sponsors include the UI International Studies Program, the Division of World Languages, Literatures, and Cultures, and international programs. I would like to thank each of these units, and especially Claire Francis, Dan Vorwerk, and Amy Green at the University of Iowa for their time and effort in making this webinar possible. Our conversation today features three presenters, Beatrice Makenda and Ramona Koob from the University of Iowa, as well as Salvatore Anyanto from the University of Dar es Salaam, who completed his doctorate at the University of Iowa. And we will begin with remarks from Anyanto, who is representing the Vice Chancellor, William Anagisye, who had originally intended to be present with us today, but was called away on last-minute business. So before I turn things over to Anyanto and the remarks from the Vice Chancellor, I should say that the webinar will last roughly 60 minutes, and we would ask you to submit questions via the Q&A function. And this will leave us 10 to 15 minutes for conversation at the end. We will also be recording this webinar, and it will be posted to our YouTube channel within the next 7 to 10 days. So please, as we begin the webinar, let me ask Anyanto to represent the Vice Chancellor, who will present some remarks, and then Anyanto will deliver his presentation. So Anyanto, welcome. It's always great to see you. You are a University of Iowa alum. You did your doctorate in history here, studied with Professor James Giblin. We've connected several times over the last few months and even the last couple of years. And so we're delighted to see you and delighted by your participation. So thank you. And we're very excited to hear what the Vice Chancellor has to say. So please feel free to start.
Okay, great. Okay. Good morning to you all. It is really an honor and privilege to be in this intellectually engaging session. I'm really proud of my alma mater, the University of Iowa. And had it not been the University of Iowa, I would not have been who I am today. So for this, I'm greatly honored and also grateful for the mentorship, support, and financial assistance that also enabled me to pursue my doctoral degree in history at the University of Iowa from 2013 to 2019. So Iowa, to me, is my second home. And had it not been the University of Iowa, I would not have been who I am today, because it is the University of Iowa that also shaped my personality. And what I do, I also do in memory of the University of Iowa. So I really thank you so much. And I thank you personally, Russ. I also extend my heartfelt gratitude to Professor Beatrice Makenda for her kind support, and now, without further ado, let me give present the Vice Chancellor's remark, who unfortunately could not join us because he also has to attend an equally important meeting as the representative for the University of Dar es Salaam, but also as the chief executive officer of our own institution. And because I serve in his office as the director in the office of the Vice Chancellor, so let me give his remarks on his behalf. Let me share the screen. Share the screen here. So this presentation is a brief history of the University of Dar es Salaam. And our Vice Chancellor, Professor William Anangisye, is now currently serving his second term as the Vice Chancellor. So the University of Dar es Salaam is, first of all, Tanzania's oldest and premier institution of higher education. It was established on October 25th, 1961, as a constituent college of the University of London. But in 1963, the University of Dar es Salaam, which is abbreviated as UDISM, was part of the University of East Africa, together with the universities of Nairobi in Kenya and Makerere University in Uganda. So it became a fully fledged university in 1970. Since its establishment, that is in 1961, 2 months before Tanganyika's independence, enrollment of students has increased from 14 students, that is 13 male students and 1 female student. And today, we talk of more than 40,000 students. And in particular, in 2023, enrollment of students increased nearly to 45,000. That is 25,700 male students and 19,300 female students. And the increase in the number of students, that is both undergraduate and graduate students, aligns with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goal on ending discrimination against women. And of course, as the University of Dar es Salaam has also made important strides to achieve gender balance. The University of Dar es Salaam was destined to be an institution of higher learning where people's minds would be trained for clear thinking, for independent thinking, for analysis, and for problem solving at the highest level. So it is therefore under this context that these tenets shaped our motto, knowledge is freedom. In Kiswahili, hekima ni uhuru. The motto symbolizes beliefs, ideals, and values of the University of Dar es Salaam. It also implies that through application of knowledge, one becomes wiser, independent, and free. Hence, education at the University of Dar es Salaam provides wisdom that gives one independence and freedom. Given this understanding, the University of Dar es Salaam had 3 functions, and these are still its core functions. First is to transmit advanced knowledge from one generation only of the society. Our vision is to advance of intellectual wealth, spearheading the quest for sustainable and inclusive education. And this also corresponds with advancement of the economic, social, and technological development of Tanzania and beyond through excellent teaching and learning, research and knowledge exchange endeavors. Finally, the University of Dar es Salaam strives to become a leading center of intellectual wealth that spearheads the quest for sustainable and inclusive education. So the University of Dar es Salaam, through the Office of the Vice Chancellor, has two units. The first is the Marketing and Communication Unit. The second is the Office of Internationalization, Convocation and Advancement. And of course, the third would also be the Office of the Director of the Office of the Vice Chancellor, which I serve as its director. Now, as far as internationalization is concerned, our internationalization policy commits the University of Dar es Salaam to expand outreach to foreign scholars, researchers, and academics. But it also commits the University of Dar es Salaam to increase graduate and postgraduate programs. And it also commits the University of Dar es Salaam to enhance digital learning infrastructure. So the University of Dar es Salaam is first of all honored and privileged to launch long-standing collaborations with the University of Iowa. And we have prioritized areas of collaborations that we think the University of Dar es Salaam and the University of Iowa would therefore work on. So the University of Dar es Salaam aspires to enhance collaboration with the University of Iowa in education, natural and applied sciences, engineering, humanities and social sciences, and information and communication technologies. So why do we perhaps find these areas significant? Collaboration between the University of Iowa and the University of Dar es Salaam is important for promoting knowledge exchange and research cooperation across continents. And this is also because we share the goal of fostering wisdom and freedom through education. And perhaps an area that we think could also be strengthened is distance education. We also acknowledge that the rapid growth presents challenges, and we therefore aim to increase distance education to reach students and researchers beyond physical classrooms. So while acknowledging the four areas of collaboration that University of Iowa and University of Dar es Salaam should think about, but it's also important for us to think about the importance of distance education. And this is therefore in cognizance of the rapid growth of technology, but also we should also take a note of the advancement of technology that should also provide us with an avenue for us to cooperate on distance education. And having said all this, thank you so much for listening. Asanteni sana.
Well, thank you, Asante Sana and Nyanto. So just a couple of remarks, and then obviously you have your presentation.
Okay.
With respect to distance education, this is definitely an area that we want to pursue with you, because it allows for the type of research collaboration that we are engaging in now. When we talk about webinars, Zoom meetings, this is a great platform for students and faculty members to get to know one another and to develop projects. We have worked with other universities across the world in this realm, and we would certainly want to encourage the same type of thing here. Similarly, I couldn't help but notice that one of your key partners is also Yonsei University in South Korea. This is a school that we've worked with. quite often. And then the sectors that you had mentioned, so education, the natural sciences, ICT, social sciences, and the humanities. The fact that you've worked with Yonsei in these areas provides, I think, a good template for us to build on these collaborations. And then finally, it's clear that the University of Dar es Salaam is a mission-driven institution that is dedicated to promoting freedom, democracy, exchange of thought. And this is very important, in terms of upholding the values of a liberal education, and one that is globally focused. So please know that you have the University of Iowa's full support. We look forward to learning from each other as we move forward. And speaking of learning from each other, we're very excited to hear your presentation, Inyato. So please go ahead.
Thank you so much, and therefore the investor looks forward to our continued collaboration. And as I also said, that the University of Dar es Salaam, being the first institution of higher education in Tanzania, was established in order to be of service to the nation. And therefore, we also do hope that our collaboration between the University of Dar es Salaam and the University of Iowa will therefore reinforce the mission as well as the objectives of the University of Dar es Salaam. And we thank you so much for your readiness. And as I also say that as my alma mater at the University of Iowa, for me, this is really an honor working with the university that has long shaped my personality. So without therefore further ado, let me now share my own presentation. I will briefly present about language, society, and culture in Tanzania, looking at then and now. And please, the next slide, please. Yeah. So it is widely acknowledged that human culture and language are deeply intertwined. And this is because that the language that we speak influences our own identity, our cultural identities, and our social realities. And I also take here language as also a symbol of authority. But of course, language use and patterns of speaking can also tell us a great deal about power and agency in the society. Next slide. Yeah, so I thought I should provide a brief overview of language, society, and culture in Tanzania in the 19th century. That in order for us to appreciate the role of language, culture, as well as identity, it's also important to look at the enlargement of scale and the development of the caravan trade in Tanzania. So in 1860, Henry Morton Stanley described the Nyamwezi caravan porters as the camel, the horse, the mule, the ass, the train, and the wagon and the cart of East and Central Africa, because they traveled regions where the camel could not enter and where the horse and the ass could not live. So this was the statement that Henry Morton Stanley in 1860, passing through Western Tanzania, described the Nyamwezi caravan porters, because these caravan porters throughout the 19th century and 28th century became carriers of ideas, language, and culture. And in the process, they used the Kiswahili language as, first of all, as a lingua franca to develop joking relations with the communities along the route. So language, through joking relations, reinforced networks of friendship and support, which was amounted to fictive and networking relations. Next slide. So the image that you see shows the trade routes in 19th century. And as you can see, Tabora and also other centers along the route also acted as also important centers of trade, culture, and language. And with language here, we mean development of Kiswahili language. Next. The next image is also about caravan porters on the march. So it was these caravan porters who also acted as carriers of culture, carriers of ideas, and carriers of language. Next. The next image also shows caravan porters marching from the East African interior to the coast. Next. The next image is also caravan porters along the coast. Next. Colonization of Africa began in 1884 and 1885 during the Berlin Conference. And this is the image that shows the partition of African continent, that although Africa was partitioned among powers, the border creation did not take into account of linguistic and cultural diversity of communities on the ground. And it is therefore surprising that even today, you find the Maasai in Kenya, but also we also have Maasai in Tanzania. You also find the Luo in Kenya, the Luo in Uganda, but also you find the Luo in Tanzania. And we also have cases of the Makua of northern Mozambique and the Makua of southern Tanzania. So it is because that border creation of African continent did not take into consideration of the linguistic and cultural diversity. And of course, this border creation did not also prevent interaction. So communities interacted even beyond the borders that were also created in 1884 and 1885. Next. So colonization of German East Africa, today Tanzania mainland, did not cease porterage. So porterage continued and also intensified after due to the construction of railroad and plantation labor. And German rule was firmly established on the Muslim and Swahili-speaking coast and its administration. And as it moved inland, it carried its coastal ethos, including Kiswahili with it. And it was therefore during the German colonial period, that is between 1885 and 1914, where Kiswahili spread and was also used as a lingua franca in German East Africa. But it was also adopted as an official language. Next slide. But the First World War, of course, we know had a repercussion on German East Africa. And it was after the First World War where Germany lost all her colonies in Africa, including what is now known as Tanzania mainland. But before the First World War, what used to be called German East Africa included the present-day Rwanda and Burundi. So they were also part of the former German East Africa. But after the First World War, there was a territorial division of German East Africa. Therefore, Burundi and Rwanda fell under Belgian colonization in 1921, and Tanganyika, what is today Tanzania mainland, fell under the British colonization. And the change of colonial master from German colonial masters to British colonial master also marked a change of the language. And it was during this period where English language also became the language of instruction and administration. So Kiswahili was consequently used in lower classes, missions, and religious instructions. So there was now a coexistence of Kiswahili and English languages in colonial Tanganyika. Next slide. So Tanganyika became independent on December 9, 1961, and united with Zanzibar on April 26, 1964, to form the United Republic of Tanzania. But in order to promote the national culture, but of course, nation building program, the government banned the use of vernacular languages and foreign languages, including English, in schools, and promoted the use of Kiswahili language as a medium of instruction in primary education and government responsibilities. And consequently, in 1962, Mr. Rashid Kawawa, who worked as the second vice president of Tanganyika, declared Kiswahili as the national language and called for and urged people to stop using English as a medium of communication. And therefore, the use of Kiswahili as a medium of instruction in primary schools also gained momentum and was henceforth used not only as the national language, but also as a medium of instruction. English was used as a medium of instruction in secondary schools, high schools, and higher learning institutions. Next slide. Now, what's the current conjuncture? Now, because time isn't our best ally, I thought I should perhaps provide you with only two issues that we should also discuss. One, as far as the current conjuncture is concerned, is that there has also been a debate whether we should adopt Kiswahili as the sole medium of communication, but also as the sole medium of instruction, or we should just use English as the only medium of communication as well as the medium of instruction. So this has in turn resulted in the struggle for dominance between these two languages. And we have two groups. Some would really advocate for English, and others would also make an argument that now, over 60 years of independence, it's therefore high time we also use the Kiswahili as a medium of instruction in all education levels in Tanzania. But second, there has also been a missing link because of the existence of these two languages. So there has also been a missing link between a language used in society and education. And in this context, I borrow the leaf from Professor Martha Koro of the University of Dar es Salaam, who is of the opinion that there has also been a link between a language used in society and education. And she makes these two major arguments. The first argument that she makes is that in rural Tanzania, the shifting from one language to another happens twice. So one is it is at entry point, and this here she considers the age from between 5 and 7 years of age. But the second is the level of mother tongue, the use of mother tongue from mother tongue to Kiswahili, and the third stage that marks the shift in from one language to another is at the commencement of secondary education, from years between 12 and 14 years of age, where both Kiswahili and English are also used. Now, these shifts, according to Martha Koro, link the child from home language and for her, she said that this does not necessarily make him or her proficient in either Kiswahili or English. So this is the current conjuncture, that we have a struggle for dominance between English and Kiswahili language, whether we should, and of course Tanzanians are now divided. Academics are also divided, whether we should use English or Kiswahili. But there is also a missing link because of these of the shifting patterns from one language to another, ranging from entry point from mother tongue to Kiswahili and the commencement of secondary education. Next slide. Now, as now historian, trained in Iowa, trained in slavery, I thought I should also, as also part of the current conjuncture, bring to attention about the language of slavery. That in an area that historians and also researchers have also faced a challenge in using language, especially here the language of slavery has also been evident in our daily encounter with elderly men and women in Tanzania. And this is because talking about slavery has and is also still considered as an anathema to people, because slavery was shameful and also contemptible. And of all elders I interviewed for the topic, it was only 9 elders who 9 elders refused to be interviewed because they felt ashamed. But secondly, some elders simply did not like the topic because it would remind them of the bad memories of slavery. But finally, because of shame, history, and slave antecedents, many people who were descendants of the formerly enslaved have abandoned the names of slave antecedents, and they have instead adopted the Christian and the Christian names. So for them, the language of slavery isn't appealing because it reminds them of the slave past, and therefore talking about slavery makes also a challenging task for us historians, but also for researchers who would also wish to probe into these topics on societies that was heavily enslaved and whose memories of slavery still ringers. Now, having said all this, Russ and all conference organizers, thank you so much for your kind attention.
Yes, thank you very much, Anyato. That was absolutely fascinating, covered a lot of different topics, and the historical context is exceedingly important. I think now we will move to our presenters from the University of Iowa. It's now my pleasure to introduce Beatrice Mkenda, whom I have known for quite some time. And Beatrice is a professor of instruction in the Swahili program. And she has been quite successful, along with her colleagues, in building the Swahili program over the last 8 to 10 years. We have seen enrollment grow. The program has become quite popular, in large part because of Beatrice's enthusiasm and expertise in the field of pedagogy, and she will be sharing some of her insights today. So Beatrice, please go ahead.
Thank you so much, Ras. Thank you, everyone, for being here today. And thank you for good introduction. I'm really honored for the comment that you gave for me. So yes, my name is Beatrice Mkenda. I'm a professor of instruction here at the University of Iowa. I teach Swahili language, and also I teach some courses on East African languages and culture. Today, I'm going to talk to you about how teaching Swahili as an African language bridges cultural and linguistic gaps. Before we move to what I'm going to talk to you today, I will give a short history of African language programs in the United States. Programs in African languages in the United States were established in the 1950s as a crucial part of the National Defense Education Act. This act led to creation of African studies and other study centers in which African languages were the major component. In the late 1960s, a growing momentum of the expansion of African languages emerged. This was powered by the Black Power movement. This era witnessed African Americans actively seeking recognition. and African languages, particularly Kiswahili, were regarded as a vital source of identity. It is during this time that colleges and universities, as well as Afrocentric schools, were also established. Another period that marked as important in teaching African languages in the United States is after the terrorist attack of the September 11, 2001. During this time, the US government identified some languages as critical for its security and economic prosperity. Swahili is one of these languages. The United States government offers scholarship to allow students in acquiring proficiency in these languages, facilitating their engagement with the global community. Funding programs such as AFLI, and BOREN are just few examples of initiatives dedicated to supporting the teaching and learning of these critical languages. There's also a National African Language Resources Center committed to advance the teaching and learning of African languages in the United States. Now we may ask ourselves, who studies African languages and why do they do it? So students who study African languages, particularly Kiswahili, are from different disciplines. Swahili is the most common taught African languages. So some universities require foreign language to fulfill a degree program. Also, students who major or minor in African studies may require a study of an African language to fulfill their degree program. Some students take African languages to enable them to conduct research, to volunteer in countries where these languages are spoken. Another reason is that there are students who have personal connection to the countries where these languages are spoken. So the justification of the African languages in the United States. Teaching of African language is not separated from its culture. So students who are studying Swahili are also studying about the Swahili people, their history, their economy, their belief system, among other things. When you teach Swahili, we are talking about the justification for African languages. When we teach a foreign language, we are teaching also the culture of that language. So the two cannot be separated. Language and culture are intertwined. So students who are taking Swahili are also learning about the Swahili people, their history, their economy, their belief systems, among other things. And when we teach Swahili, we promote language diversity, and it ensures its preservation and sustainability because it increases the number of its speakers. Students who learn Swahili find it easy to navigate, not only in Swahili-speaking communities, but also in different global settings. Learning another language enables one to access knowledge produced in the target language. Through this experience, students may also participate in knowledge production through translation in any multicultural settings. So this is the practical application of teaching Kiswahili at the University of Iowa. The Swahili program here at the University of Iowa serves to the community. It provides translation and interpretation services to various settings here in Iowa and all states that teaches Swahili. For example, in schools, as you can see here, this is the school that is very close to our university. So you'll find that the information is in foreign languages, Swahili as one of them. And why do they do that? Because there are students from Swahili-speaking countries whose English is not in higher proficiency. So they need to communicate and they need to receive the information that they need to receive in the language that they understand. So we translate and provide interpretation for this family and for the students and their families. Also, when this family go to the hospitals, they need to understand what the doctor is saying. and they need to get the information that they need to get from the doctor and follow the instructions that they need. So they need someone to interpret for them to make sure the communication is effectively. There are also community centers that provide service for immigrants, and therefore for those Swahili speakers, we provide services for them to translate or to interpret the information so they understand what they're supposed to do. Other sectors that we provide translation is also the courthouse, churches, and government offices. You can see here also the insurance companies have different languages that simplify the information to the clients, and Swahili is one of them. You can see this is one of the insurance company here in the United States. So when we teach Swahili, we are providing career opportunities for our students. So Swahili is an asset for students whose interests are in international affairs and international relations in East African regions. Some of our students who study Swahili may work as an interpreters, teachers, consular, ambassadors, and other professions. Therefore, Swahili plays a crucial role, not only for security and economic prosperity, but also as a medium for connecting and serving individuals in the diverse communities of the United States. In order to enable students to serve and function in the contemporary diverse world, there's a need for institutions in the US and those in the Swahili-speaking countries to collaborate and set up programs that will enhance attainment of the above-mentioned experience. This collaboration could take a form of establishment of study abroad programs, faculty-student exchange, research endeavors, volunteer opportunities, internship, and so forth. Thank you, everybody.
Many thanks, Beatrice. There's no doubt that you are focused on the social application of linguistic skills in the community in particular, but also in the business world. And this is one of the reasons why languages are so important. It's to connect cultures, but also to emphasize the social and economic connections that are so vital to keeping the world moving forward. And kind of along these lines, Ramona Koob will be talking about civic engagement as it relates to Spanish language. Ramona is a PhD student in the Spanish and Portuguese department and is also a graduate teaching assistant in linguistics. And Ramona, we know you've been working on this presentation for quite some time, and we're delighted to have you this morning with us.
Thank you so much for the introduction. All right, here we go. So yes, my name is Ramona, and I am part of the Humanities Lab at the University of Iowa, which is a collaboration between students, staff, and faculty of the Departments of Translation, Linguistics, and as well as the Education Department. And we focused on language justice and working together with the community. So when we started out, we were first thinking, what is language justice? How is it defined? What do people understand when they hear language justice? And so we did some research and we found that there is already a great variety of different definitions of language justice out there. And so one of them that we looked at, for example, was from the American Bar Association. And that definition states that language justice is an evolving framework based on the notion of respecting every individual's fundamental language rights to be able to communicate, understand, and be understood in the language in which they prefer and feel most articulate and powerful. And then also in a legal context, language justice is a commitment to ensuring individuals marginalized based on their national origin, ethnic identification, and language are not denied equal access to service, remedies, and justice overall. So we took the definitions that we found and created our own definition of language justice during our class. And for us, language justice advocates for the right of all people to communicate in the language or maybe even multiple languages in which they feel most comfortable in and are capable of. Because language justice is relevant everywhere. We encounter language justice barriers, injustices, maybe even in public spaces, in the workplace, in doctors' offices, like it was mentioned in the previous presentations already, or at the courthouse, in schools. And language justice for us was also about dismantling hierarchies and place on how people speak. So when we hear language hierarchies, oftentimes people only think about a multilingual environment and which language might be seen as superior to others. But it is also important to highlight the fact here that this can also apply within a single language. For example, in the English language, there's so many different varieties of English, different dialects that are spoken here, but it always seems that there is a hierarchy within the language of be more acceptable and superior over other ones. And language can also create barriers or injustices. So if we are looking at the United States, or specifically Iowa as a state, we see that English is oftentimes seen as the superior language. For example, even though there is no official language in the United States, Iowa had a law put in multiple years ago that stated that English is the official language of Iowa, and therefore it is oftentimes expected that English is the only language spoken at work, or that official documents might be only in English, and that can pertain to housing documents, for example, rental agreements, or documents used in schools, voting documents, or emergency alerts, for example, severe weather alerts that may speak, understand, and are most comfortable in. And that also leads to the stigmatization of so-called non-standard Englishes. For example, African American. But then when we look at that, what actually is standard English? What can we call a standard language? And we came to the conclusion that there actually is no such thing as standard English. Then what we did was a project between the Humanities Lab and the city of Dubuque in Iowa. And the Humanities Lab project was just a really small part of a bigger project that is between the city of Dubuque and the Iowa Initiative for Sustainable Communities. I have the link to their website here, but due to time constraints, I am not opening that and sharing it right now. But if anybody is interested, I'm happy to share that link. To start the Humanities Lab, a grant was received from the Obermann Center, which allowed us to work together with city officials and communities in Dubuque. And we had three main partners, which were from the Office of Equity and Human Rights, the Public Health Director, and the Office of Sustainability. And we were asked to work with the city of Dubuque and start this project with this combination of different departments in the Humanities Lab, because there is a really great variety of languages spoken in Dubuque. And just to name a few of them, there is, for example, a Marshallese community in Dubuque. There are a lot of different Spanish variations and dialects spoken there. For example, there's at least one Guatemalan community there. And then there are also different indigenous languages spoken. So when we started the project, we were originally asked to mainly just translate. However, our goal for the project was not just providing translations, but we wanted to achieve a community engagement. We wanted to collaborate with the community and really highlight our value of reciprocity, and not just come in from the outside and do outreach or tell people what to do. So we really wanted collaboration and reciprocity. Another big goal for us was to decenter English as the sole language, because there's so many other languages spoken out there. And oftentimes when we look at language justice and how English is presented, we also encounter linguistic justice, and oftentimes that can also be linked to racial justice. So we wanted to recognize ways that we talk about language. And like I mentioned before, we wanted to decenter that hierarchy and just taking out terms that might not be useful when people fill out questionnaires or when they talk about their language. For example, stating native language or mother tongue, because that might not always be the language that you're most comfortable in, or it might be confusing when you fill out a document which languages you speak, which order are you speaking. It doesn't really have an impact on how well you understand something or not. Then we also wanted to focus on providing resources. We didn't want to just go in and look what is the city lacking, but we wanted to provide something for them. And so we started creating a language justice toolkit. And there were three main portions to it that we thought was important to include, which is the educational resources, engagement resources, and endorsement resources. So for the educational resources, we first of all wanted to define certain concepts, then maybe also give examples of practice activities and lesson plans on how language justice could be addressed in schools. Then for the engagement resources, we were studying, and it's still in the progress, creating assessment questionnaires that could be distributed, for example, at community centers or different churches, to get an understanding of what languages, first of all, are spoken there, what is working really well in the communities, but maybe where could there be an improvement? What is it that communities want? What is it that they need? And then also create outreach templates and workflows. And then for the endorsement resources, we wanted to provide different case studies, research summaries, and also give them an idea of outcome expectations. So here is an example of what will be included in our language justice toolkit. This is still an ongoing process, but those are the main topics that will be talked about. So first of all, we wanted people to know what is language justice, who is involved, how does it manifest, and what can we do. Then provide them with certain guidelines, assessment strategies, workflow strategies, and also research that helps to advocate for language justice. However, there were certain challenges with the project as well, and the project is still ongoing and it is ever evolving. So like I mentioned beforehand, the first thing that we were asked was to purely translate. And so we wanted the involvement with the community, and that was a little bit more challenging than expected because some communities don't really want to be found, or they don't want somebody from the outside coming in telling them what to do, and that was never our goal. The first step is to establish trust within the communities and see what those communities actually want and what they need. And then also the work with the city was a little bit slower than we would like to have encountered, but we're all really busy, and this was just another project for the city. So sometimes setting up meetings and email responses were a lot slower than we were hoping for. So that slowed down our process in finding out exactly what it is that the communities there want and how we can help them. And then we also encountered some political challenges after talking to other departments at the University of Iowa or trying to apply for other grants. It was brought to our attention that just the name, Language Justice Toolkit, could have a political implication to it with the word justice in it, which was never our intention when we started this. So we were asked to maybe think about of changing the name to be able to work with this toolkit, even though it might be the same as we have it established right now. But that's something that we are currently thinking about and how to move forward with this. Thank you so much, everybody, for your attention.
Many thanks, Ramona. And so we do have time, about 5 to 7 minutes for questions. So those of you who would like to pose questions can certainly put them in the Q&A. But I have a couple just to start off with. And first of all, I thought each of the presentations was absolutely fascinating. And the presenters can go ahead and turn on their cameras and microphones now. One of the things that I saw that linked all three of the presentations was the emphasis on how language, and especially language education, reinforces questions of access, justice, and acculturation. And so one question, because we're dealing with a lot of different societies here and also different time periods, because the historical context is quite important too. But one thing that I see in common is sort of the struggle that cultures have to maintain their linguistic identity, but also integrate with a new and or what's what I'm looking for, more politically powerful language. We see this in East Africa during the period of colonization. We see this with newly arrived populations in the United States. What are the best strategies for retaining one's own language and one's own culture, while also learning a new culture, which is essential to either economic advancement or just political survival? What have the three of you learned in your experience? And maybe I'll start with Enyanto, because just of the chronology and what does the history of colonization teach us about these linguistic struggles?
Thank you so much, Russ. It's a great question, but I'm afraid that it's also a complex question, a complex one.
Yes, it is. It is.
Yeah. So, well, I believe there is no society that develops in isolation. No society that develops in isolation, and learning, adaptation of new cultures and language is also extremely important. So if we take communities in Tanzania as an example, that although they also came in contact with other languages, notably English, and of course other languages, within the context of enlargement of scale. Yes, they did struggle to retain their own identity, but of course they retained in a context of not abandoning totally foreign influence. So they did learn new cultures and languages, and also used these languages and cultures as also an opportunity to maintain their identity, but also as an opportunity to revisit some of the cultural practice. So I find the question very complex, but also interesting. Holding a firm belief that no society that develops in isolation, and even the struggles that I have also pointed out in my presentation. If we go during the British period, for instance, beginning between the 1920s and 1950s, yes, they did introduce English as a medium of instruction, but of course there were some sort of resentments. But of course, this did not, in fact, mean that communities totally abandoned Kiswahili. The same also applies to post-colonial period. So, although the government in 1962 declared that Kiswahili would therefore be used as a national language, would therefore be adopted as a national language, it did not completely mean that they ignored English. So I believe that no society that develops in isolation, and of course the final example that I provided about the language of slavery, that there has also been tension that people would also like, and I find the third presenter, Ramona Kubi, that I find her presentation also does correspond with my with what I was now thinking. That is therefore high time I also thought about a language justice. So although these people are struggling to hide their identity, but this does not mean that they should develop in isolation. So language adaptation, language learning is extremely important, and identity is also extremely important. So as we maintain our own identity, we should also think of learning new cultures and learning new languages. And this is what I think entails Ramona's conceptualization and Ramona's understanding of what should perhaps be termed as language justice.
Very good. Thank you, Onyanto. And Ramona, would you like to respond to Onyanto?
Yes, I really like his response to your question, and it is a really complex question, and it is really difficult, as we have found out in the humanities lab, on how to work with different communities and maintain identity and their language while living somewhere else where there is another majority societal language spoken. And I think even though we tried to come up with a strategy like the Language Justice Toolkit, it does not work for every single community. It is maybe a guideline on what can be done, but what I want to highlight here is really the importance of the collaboration with the different communities and the reciprocity, finding out what is it that they even want, what do they need, and not just go in and impose something on them, but rather working together with them. I think that should be a big part of the strategy when trying to have everybody's identity and culture and language maintained.
Right. And so Ramona and Onyanto and Beatrice, kind of along those lines, I want to bring in the questions from the audience. The first is, and each of you alluded to this at some point in your presentations, how are communities, or for the communities who are not willing to work with outsiders, how did you bridge that gap? I mean, Beatrice, I know that you had that your projects have focused a lot on translation, working in schools, community centers, things like that, or other organizations such as those. But how did you deal with communities who were maybe not receptive to your efforts or initiatives, or at least at first?
From my own experience, I don't think I have met anybody who is denying the service, because they need to know, they need information. So when they get that in the language they can understand, in the language that they speak, they appreciate it. So mostly we get a call that they need help for translation, they need help for the interpretation. But from my own experience, I don't think I have come across anybody denying or saying, no, we cannot work with you. Most of the time, I find them appreciating because they can get the information that they need.
Right. Maybe Ramona, in your work, you maybe had to bridge that gap more than what Beatrice is describing.
Yeah, so our idea was to work with different community centers or maybe churches where we know that different language communities might go to, where they feel comfortable. And giving them distributing resources there that starts establishing that trust. So if it's not somebody coming in directly from the outside to the community, but rather going somewhere where they're comfortable, giving them, for example, a questionnaire or survey, providing them with the toolkit there. And that's how we can slowly establish the collaboration.
Right. And then one other question along those lines is, a member of the audience would like you to talk a little bit more about the concerns with the term justice regarding the language justice toolkit. Why was justice a problematic term?
We were told that the word justice has a really strong political term to it. So it's almost seen as a propaganda, trying to push in just one direction, even though that was never our intention. But coming from a linguistic standpoint and looking at also linguistic justice, for us, the word justice was appropriate. So that was just a feedback that we have gotten, that it might have some political agenda or political implication to it.
Right. Well, and that's the reason why we are educators, right? Is because we want to address what we believe could be misperceptions or assumptions that aren't necessarily based on our own experiences, especially working in the field. And so we do need to wrap up, but there is one more question that I do want to pose to the group, and that is, how can we resolve the tension between the goal of language justice, that is to say, to respect individuals' desire to communicate in the language they feel most comfortable in, and the practical demands of offering services to a community? For example, is there a way to offer public education to a multilingual community seeking to have their children experience a variety of languages? Maybe, Beatrice, I'll ask that question of you.
Yes, this is possible, and some universities here at the university, they have outreach program where educators from different foreign language program, they visit schools and they talk to schools about the languages they teach, and they share the culture as well. So there's a way to reach out to the community and introduce them to the languages and culture. And it's not necessarily like we're going to teach them how to speak that language. We provide a general idea of there's a language that is named ABC, and this is this is just a gist of its culture, and maybe even where it's located too. Some of the universities, I've participated in at least 3 universities here at the University of here in the United States, where we provided outreach programs to schools and to communities too, especially in the senior homes.
Okay. Very good. Very good. Oh, and so it looks like we do have more time, which is great. I'm delighted to have the questions from the audience. The next one is, along these lines, have you found ways to raise acceptance levels from the predominant or language of power, understanding the importance of language and culture? That is to say, on one level, you get to populations will accept a certain language of power or from a community that has power over them. But by the same token, I guess you want that quote unquote dominant language or predominant culture to also respect the language of newly arrived populations, or in the case of colonization, indigenous populations. So acceptance has to work both ways. It has to be bi-directional. So how do we get the colonizers or former colonizers to understand the importance of language and culture of the people that they have colonized or dominated? How does that reciprocity work. Maybe, Anyanto, I'll ask you to respond to that.
Thank you so much for such a great question. I think in one of the chapters of my dissertation for my PhD, I also worked on translation of languages, and my approach to translation was a reciprocal partnership. That translation involved both the influence of Christian missionaries, as well as first generation Christians who are also descendants of the former slaves. So, of course, colonial state officials, as well as missionaries, of course, promoted the use of English, and of course they took interest in learning these languages, but of course these languages were not even promoted as a medium of instruction. And this now brings me to one of the challenges I have also encountered for the past 6 years. So I've been working on Western Tanzania, a region that a community that speaks a language that is completely different from my own language. But of course, this speech community also interacted with other communities from Eastern DRC, and also other communities from the present day Rwanda and Burundi, who are also currently living in Western Tanzania. So the challenge I have therefore encountered is on when I pose a direct question about the slave past. They tend to ignore the questions because they feel ashamed, they don't like it, and most importantly, they don't like the language. So I think what is important, and what I have also devised as a copy, learning their language, but also engaging them to understand that it is also part of their history, but it is also part of their own heritage. So it is therefore under this context where now people have now come to realize that it is of no big deal if they keep hiding their own identity, if they keep hiding their own past, because it is also part of their history, and it is also part of heritage. So I also find that notwithstanding the challenges that we might also encounter in the cause of reinforcing what Ramona calls language justice, but I find that we should take these challenges as an avenue for us to think about the coping strategies that would not only include outreach, but also engaging these communities so that they can also appreciate their own language, their own culture, as well as heritage.
Right. So these challenges then become learning opportunities, and
Yes.
learning opportunities in turn become opportunities to solve problems and find solutions. And that's, I think, another common thread that I see in all presentations is that, yes, there's practical application, but the application is in the service of problem solving, and the problems revolve around acculturation, justice, access, this type of civic engagement on the part of higher education, I think, needs more awareness, especially because it is effective, or at least can be effective, and underscores the social value that higher ed can bring to our communities. kind of along those lines, one of the attendees asks, what strategies can be employed to remove language barriers in various sectors? So as I see the strategies, I think about best practices. And Ramona and Beatrice in particular, in your work, which fully engages communities or directly engages communities, what are the best practices that you have found to remove language barriers? Maybe start with Ramona and then go to Beatrice.
Some ways obviously have to do with interpreting and translation. And so we also looked a lot at different ways that translating or interpreting could be used. The pros and cons of having a person there versus using technology, for example, somebody on FaceTime that could help them. So I think it's really important that there is some kind of system out there that helps people that might be more comfortable in another language, even if it is through text messages or WhatsApp messages in their language to help them with emergency alerts. If there is a severe weather alert and it only gets sent out in English, it would be helpful if there was an option to help them translate it in the language that they understand most, or making sure that there is a service out there that provides interpretation for them as well. That could be an in-person translator, or having somebody on standby somewhere that could call in on a phone or on an iPad and help like that. I think that will help with the challenges and the barriers, at least with some of them, when there is an urgent need for it. Breaking down barriers in the big picture, I think is a little bit more complicated and probably needs a lot more different resources than just translating and interpreting.
Right. But it makes sense to start with something that is concrete and readily identifiable because it addresses an immediate problem. And that way, once you address immediate problems, then you can establish connections that can deal with sort of larger issues that you're dealing with. Beatrice, please, same question.
Yeah, so what I find really useful, and I experience it myself, is when I meet with someone from Tanzania, from Burundi, from Kenya, for example. There's that feeling of feeling comfortable. They feel comfortable there with someone that they can understand. Sometimes they can even tell you something that probably they don't want the doctor to hear, or probably they don't want even the person they're talking to know, but they can, like, asking for your opinion, although we are not supposed to give their opinion, but you can hear them bringing that up, like, oh, what if this thing? But and I see them feeling very comfortable, especially when they receive that information. Otherwise, they will tell you, I didn't really understand what they were saying. I didn't know what I do, especially in schools too, when there's information like you need to be at school at this time and they don't know what it says. So when they receive that information, they really appreciate and feel comfortable that they are able to participate and engage in the community and do what they're supposed to do.
Very good, very good. And then we've got a question that is addressed to Professor Nyanto, but I'll also ask Ramona and Beatrice to answer it as well. And so the question is, Professor Nyanto, I would kindly like to know more about how the universities of Dar es Salaam and Iowa are working toward fostering a learning space where wisdom and outside the classroom learning is promoted. I recall you mentioned wisdom in the academic space when you began your presentation. How do languages come into play in promoting wisdom in the academic space? Thank you. So that connection between language and wisdom, I think it's a really interesting question because we've been talking a lot about practical application, applied learning, which is great, but it also, I think, is important to think philosophically as well. So language and wisdom, I think it's a fascinating pairing. Anyanto. So maybe talk a little bit more about how you conceive of this notion, and then we can discuss it within the context of both Beatrice's and Ramona's presentations.
Thank you so much, Ras, for such a great question. I should perhaps provide a history of the founding of the University of Dar es Salaam. So the University of Dar es Salaam was established 2 months before Tanganyika gained independence. And the first president of Tanganyika, Julius Kambarage Nyerere, in 1970 also served as the chancellor, which is equivalent to the president of the university. So Julius Nyerere destined the University of Dar es Salaam. He had envisioned that the University of Dar es Salaam be established in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania's capital by then, which we would perhaps draw analogy of Washington, that the first president of the United States is now the first president, Abraham Lincoln, thinking, or Lincoln or any other president, thinking of establishing the first university, the first American university in the capital, the Washington, D.C. So this is what Julius Nyerere thought, that I would also wish to have the first university be established here in the capital. Why? In order to save his government. So the University of Dar es Salaam was purposefully established in order, first of all, to serve the government by providing with money power, or by providing with the human capital. But second, it was also established in order to be of service to the larger society of Tanzania, the larger communities of Tanzania. And in 1970, as I was also presenting that in 1970, the University of Dar es Salaam became a fully fledged university. So in his speech to mark the inauguration of the University of Dar es Salaam in 1970, Julius Nyerere said that he would also wish the University of Dar es Salaam to inculcate students with first, independent thinking, second, clear thinking, and finally, to be of service to the society. So it is therefore under this context where we find that the motto of the University of Dar es Salaam became knowledge is freedom. Knowledge is wisdom. And the University of Dar es Salaam and Iowa can therefore use language to not only inculcate students and researchers with the freedom and justice, but also we could also use language as an avenue to help students, to help researchers, as well as communities, first, to think independently. I think Professor Beatrice Mkenda has pointed out this, that people would feel secure to express themselves in their own language. So the University of Dar es Salaam and the University of Iowa should therefore use this avenue of language teaching, language teaching and language and research on language for independent thinking, for clear thinking, and for problem solving. So I find this to be an opportunity and an avenue for these two institutions to use language for problem solving, for independent thinking, and for clear thinking, which to the University of Dar es Salaam becomes knowledge. Becomes part of the motto of knowledge is freedom and knowledge is wisdom.
Right. So it speaks to social values, but also social objectives around communication and language. So what is the purpose beyond, practical problem solving? It goes to a higher level in terms of constructing what kind of society and what kind of people we want to be. And so in the 2 minutes that we have left, maybe I'll ask Beatrice and Ramona to respond to that issue. How do you see wisdom as part of your current work? So Beatrice first.
Yeah, for me, I think I see wisdom as the compass and the language as the map through which the knowledge is guided. So, and when we are learning a language, we are able to interact and understand each other. And remember, when we are learning the language, we are also understanding the culture. So if I didn't learn English, maybe I'll not be able to interact with the English-speaking people, because I really need to know when to shake hands, when not to shake hands, when what to say, at what time, and not what not to say. So it is really important, and because when we are using that language, we're using the wisdom is guiding us. So I feel like both are together and they help us to interact and perform our activities and achieve the goals that are intended to be achieved.
Right. I really like that map and compass analogy, especially as it relates to guidance. So guiding students and guiding ourselves toward higher goals. And Ramona, same question. How does wisdom factor into your scholarship?
Yeah, I really like Beatrice's answer, and I've never actually thought about that compass and map idea, but I agree with her that if we just teach the language and we go in a community just by knowing the language, we might not be fully able to help them until we understand their culture and we work with the culture and the language together to create that wisdom, to create that trust and build that trust. And only with that wisdom, with language and culture, we will actually be able to help them and make them feel more comfortable speaking their own language and living their own culture in a context where there might be in a different culture and a different language setting.
Very good. And so with that, I think we'll need to close the webinar. I'd like to thank Professor Enyanto, Professor Makenda, and Professor Koob for their insight and their wisdom as we tackle these issues. We certainly hope to continue this discussion in the classroom and in our research. And please know that international programs will be here to support you in those endeavors. And thank you very much to our team here at International Programs. Thank you very much to the audience for making this a very successful and thought-provoking conversation. So thanks to everyone again, and have a good rest of your day.